let me prove it to you, because it's good. And you're watching this video to get my take on what's going on. And my take is that we have good things setting up. The setup continues to take shape in the midst of pure fear and panic. And that's what we experienced in the stock market the past 2 weeks. Pure fear and panic. That's what this is right here. This is pure fear and panic. But what do I see setting up? What do my eyes tell me right here? Well, I see the makings of a massive double bottom. That's what I see. The makings of a massive double bottom. Now that fits in with the ABC correction framework, the inverted ABC correction framework, which could take us to new highs, but only slightly new highs, not a huge, massive bull run. That's not necessarily what I see. But all I really care about is the environment to produce the altcoin season. Now, we'll get to the Ethereum development in a moment, but let's take a look at the DXY. Oh, look at these weekly candles. They just can't seem to close above that 786 level. And when you look at this on the weekly time frame, you really see kind of like a head and shoulders, right? You see left shoulder, head, right shoulder. And like we said last week, no coincidence that this is occurring at the 786 Fibonacci level. Theoretically, the last line of defense before the dollar should take a nice little swing to the downside and set up some bullish momentum for the stock market, which sets up some bullish momentum for Bitcoin. And just like I showed you in that double bottom scenario, you can see Bitcoin also forming some type of double bottom. That's what this looks like to me. These look like double bottom situations. That is good news, kid. That's what my eyes are seeing. So I'm corroborating that with the DXY. And I'll go even one step further. I'll corroborate that with bonds. So if I look at the bond yields right here, right, those go in line with the US dollar, right? So if these things are going up, the US dollar is going up. This is the 2-year. This is the short-term bond. Now, this is the one that's been the most bullish, right? Now, I will make an argument right here that this sucker might have just hit a major reversal point. Pinpoint nailed that 1.618 after a big run, right? Now, that's not to say this thing can't go higher. Just like we've said about the US dollar. The US dollar is in a bullish sequence, but it needs to pull back. And for the same reasons that the US dollar needs to pull back, this 2-year bond needs to pull back. As money comes out of bonds, as money comes out of the US dollar, we create that risk-on environment. Now, what's the other major corroboration point for all of this going on right now, dude? Well, it's what just happened to Ethereum this week. And I will say, the idea that people call this the merge, that's very misleading, because what it really is a supply dynamic shift in Ethereum, a fundamental supply shift, right? So what really happened to Ethereum this week? We literally had a triple halving of the supply of Ethereum, right? So the supply is cut in half once, and then that is cut in half again, and then that is cut in half a third time. A triple halving, an exponential reduction of the supply of Ethereum. Dude, what do we know about basic kindergarten facts? When you cut down supply, you have an opportunity to increase price. Now, that opportunity is contingent on demand staying the same. Now, is demand for Ethereum staying the same? Well, if you know how blockchain applications are developed, then you realize that, yes, absolutely the demand of Ethereum is staying the same, if not going higher and higher and higher. So if we have a situation where the demand for Ethereum is staying the same, but the supply of Ethereum is now cut exponentially by 3, Well, then, dude, literally, are you kidding me? I mean, that is sort of that perfect catalyst for a significant upside move in Ethereum, which would translate to upside moves for the rest of the altcoin market for sure, right? And when we consider how all of these markets work together, right, you have to consider that this Ethereum triple halving event has implications for the stock market, right? And obviously the stock market needs to go higher for the cryptos to go higher, absolutely. But when we look at the stock market isolated and we're just looking at the Dow Jones by itself, all we really see is like scary nightmares, right? We just see like bad news. But then when you consider that a massive, the biggest bullish event that could have ever happened in the history of cryptocurrency happened this past week, literally. When you consider that, then this double bottom scenario starts to make a whole lot more sense, right? You see what I'm saying? These markets all have relationships to each other. If something bullish is going on in one market, that will be bullish in other markets, at least to a certain extent. And like I said, I'm not thinking that the Dow Jones is going to rip insanely high. I think the best case scenario we have in the Dow Jones is the same thing I've been talking about for a really long time, and it's just a 1.618. Like, that's kind of your best. I think that's the best case scenario here, in my personal opinion. And if you do make it up to the 1.618, that is serious green lighting for crypto. And then, of course, you have the fundamental bullish factor, which is the Ethereum triple halving, right? So with all that in mind, kid, I look at things like Filecoin, dude, and I'm like, wow. That's what I'm like. I'm like, wow. Because what I see on Filecoin is I see this thing holding major support at a place where there was a ton of price action, right? It's not falling through this place where there was tons of price action in the past. It's holding on top of it, right? And the reason I like Filecoin is literally just because of the Fibonacci implications. That's the main reason, right? So Filecoin at the absolute bottom of its range, most likely, when we consider what's going on with Ethereum, when we consider the double bottom setting up the Dow Jones, the double bottom setting up in Bitcoin, the topping structure setting up on the DXY, how does that relate to my actual investment decisions? Well, I want to make the decision that's going to make me the most money on top of all of these different factors. And right now, that's Filecoin in my mind. Because Filecoin is a reputable top 100 cryptocurrency, and it just has insane volatility, absolutely insane volatility. And this setup is beautiful because the first level that I'm targeting, even actually before the 236, we already kind of have, you see this double bottom here. You kind of have a double bottom setup right here, just like you have in those other assets, right? You have this double bottoms thing, right? And where do we think that first double bottom setup could take us to? Yeah, probably a 4.236 extension based on this little structure here, right? And if we are actually going to stay bullish, well, then these levels are all valid, right? And then that's where I'm getting these insane multiples on Filecoin. And what I like to do is I like to look at what other coins have done relative to these all-time highs and these subsequent lows. I look at something like TRB, right? And I look at off of its all-time high to the subsequent low. And I looked at it literally nailed the 236 off of that low. And what's really funny is this looks like a double bottom, right? Is it that TRB is showing us what might be happening for other assets? You see what I'm saying? You have this double bottom structure, and then after that double bottom completes, you tag up the 236. And then, of course, you have a major drawback, but that's okay. That's just potentially, like I said last week, this might be your wave 2 down in a larger structure to the upside. But I don't need to get that far ahead of myself just yet. Right now, I can just look at this double bottom, and then I look at this massive rip to the 236 that occurred after the double bottom was completed. I look at Filecoin, and I'm like, wow, maybe TRB is just ahead of the game, And Filecoin is setting up to do something really similar. And then, of course, I think about the fundamental factor of what happened to Ethereum, and I'm like, yeah, the wind is theoretically at your back. I mean, it's not theoretically at your back. It's definitely at your back when you have an exponential decrease in supply, which is what happened to Ethereum. Now, one thing I like to point out here is that, Bitcoin has its 4-year halving cycle, right? So the miner reward for Bitcoin gets cut in half every 4 years. So let's just look at the last time the miner reward for Bitcoin was cut in half. So the last time Bitcoin supply was halved was right here. It was May 2020, right here, right? So after a significant bottom right here. Now, did it really look like we were going to make this massive, massive bull run back here in May 2020? Honestly, no. And I actually remember that. This was when I first started buying cryptocurrency. It was right around this time. And I literally wasn't buying it thinking that it was going to do something like this. That's not what I thought. It was more just like, oh, wow, all my gigs are canceled. I better do something with this free stimulus money that the government gave me. So I just did this. This is what I did. I didn't really think about, how far it could go. And I wasn't really technical at this point, but I just remember the sentiment, and I just remember feeling like a psycho idiot for buying Bitcoin back at these levels, right? I definitely didn't think that like there was going to be this major bull market. We just came off of this huge, this nightmare crash, right? And the whole thing is nobody really knew if the economy was going to recover at that point. That's important to understand, is right at these levels. Yeah, you had a nice bounce out of this capitulation event, but nobody really knew that the economy was going to recover, and the same thing with the Dow Jones. Like, nobody knew back here, like May 2020 right here, June 2020. Nobody knew this thing was going to make new all-time highs, right? The Federal Reserve didn't even know that, which is why they printed so much money, right? They didn't actually know how much money they would need to keep the economy intact. That's how deep the fear was, right? And then I'll just reference this because I've said this in many videos, but I just want to give you the source on this. 80% of all US dollars in existence were printed in the last 22 months. And this is an article from December 18, 2021, right? So that's insane, right? That's huge, right? That is a major factor in these markets staying bullish, right? And when you consider some crazy number like this, well, then maybe my 1.618 is an understatement for how high this thing could go, right? When you really consider it like that. But really, the major point is there's still enough liquidity in the system to facilitate major bullish movements in these markets. And on top of that, you have a really, really big fundamental factor. So what I'm trying to compare here is that when the Bitcoin halving cycle occurred in May 2020, no one necessarily thought that it was a given that it was going to have a big bull market afterwards. A lot of people actually said, no, Bitcoin's dead. It's never coming back. No one cares about the halving cycle anymore. That's what a lot of people were thinking in May 2020. This is similar price action for Ethereum, right? You just had the biggest bullish event, right? You had a halving cycle times 3 on Ethereum. And, the whole economic outlook is like nightmares. You're going to lose everything. Oh my God, we're going to have the Great Depression. That's what everyone's thinking right now. And you look at the price action, you're like, yeah, I don't really see a major bull run coming if I just look at the chart. But that's how it felt and how it looked for Bitcoin during its last halving cycle. So I think that's important to realize, is that, the sentiment is really bad right now. But as we know from inversion theory, that's a good sign. Markets bottom on bad sentiment. And then when you really look into the fundamentals of what's going on, you have reason to believe that the fundamentals for Ethereum are actually stronger than they've ever been, literally. In all of this price action, through all this history, you now have the strongest fundamental argument for Ethereum to have a bull run than you ever had. And so when I really ask myself, what's the landscape going to be in 5-6 months, I really think like we'll be looking back on September 2022 and being like, oh my God, it was so obvious. Obviously, we should have just been buying everything. Obviously. That's really what my heart is telling me. And a major corroboration point here that I really go back to is the fact that here we are, the third week in a row where the dollar is closing under the 786 Fibonacci. And these are not exactly bullish candles. You know, last week's candle was specifically bearish. This is more of a neutral candle, but where it closed relative to the Fibonacci structure, that's what makes it bearish. And then look here, right? Like I said last week, that moving average, it's starting to flatten out. I mean, you have the very, very early signs of reversal in this DXY. And you don't need to have a massive DXY crash in order for the stocks and the cryptos to run. You just need a bit of a pullback here. You know, probably a pullback to the 618, maybe to test these levels here, right? But that's plenty. That's plenty of room for these markets to move in a really big way when you consider the fundamentals here, right? So that's really how I'm thinking here. You know, I'm thinking of risk reward mainly, right? This is all just risk reward because I know that I could be wrong. I know that I could lose anything that I put in the market at this point. I understand that. This is risk reward. So if I think of it in terms of risk reward, I'm thinking we're potentially set up for the biggest reward we've actually ever seen in the cryptocurrency market, literally. And so am I willing to take a risk based on what I think the likely reward is? Of course I am. I'm not willing to necessarily bet the farm. You know, I'm keeping cash on the sidelines for sure because I really don't know what's going to happen. And I need to practice hedging. We all need to practice hedging because nothing is guaranteed. But based on the same thesis that I've held for now literally going on 2 years, this is the moment where I basically need to put my money where my mouth is in terms of this is what we've been waiting for. We've really been waiting for a fundamental bullish catalyst to take place in markets at the moment where the markets are at a really desirable buying point. That's exactly what we've got. And when we talk about the herd mentality, that's a check, right? The herd mentality, check that box because the herd mentality is we're going down. This is not good. We should be prepared for the depression. That's really what most people are thinking. And they're thinking that because all they keep thinking of is how interest rates are keep going higher, right? That's what everyone's thinking. They're like, well, the Fed has to keep raising interest rates, so there's no hope for anything. But I'll say it again. I basically say this in every single white knuckle report, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's literally inversion theory 101, which is that rising interest rates cause massive bullish movements in markets. Now, that's followed by major crashes, but rising interest rates historically cause massive bullish moves in markets. Look at this one, right? Rising interest rates all the way into the summer of 2019. The interest rates start coming down. And here we are, March 2020. The markets crash, massive capitulation event after the interest rates start going down. What do we see right now in interest rates? They are going up. They're probably going to keep going up. Yeah, maybe that line is starting to turn. But if you really look at this with a lot of nuance, you realize that the major blow-off move typically only happens after this thing has actually turned over, right? It's like right in this little window here, right around this part is when you have the massive, massive blow-off top. Like, look at this, right? February 20, that's when they dropped. That's when these things started dropping like a stone, February 20. But if we look at the Dow Jones back here, February 20, the top occurred right at that point where the interest rate started dropping like a stone, right? So that's the way I'm playing this is like when these things start to accelerate to the downside, and we're going to be in massive euphoria at that time. Like markets will be super euphoric because it'll be like, hey, look, they're finally lowering interest rates. Oh my God, everything's saved. The economy is saved. The markets are going to go on forever because they're finally lowering interest rates. Total euphoria, right? Absolute euphoria at that point. But that's when we get the hell out. And you'll be seeing cryptos launch like insanity, right? It'll be like, oh my God, there's no end in sight. This could never end. But as we've seen in the past, when cryptos start going psychoparabolic, well, that's usually the end of a major cycle. So that's how I'm playing it, right? That's inversion theory. Inversion theory is everyone's going to think that the Fed pivoting to lower interest rates means that the stock market can just keep going on forever. But really, that's the anticipatory cue that the stock market is about to crash, and therefore crypto is about to crash, even with this bullish factor for Ethereum. I just think the bullish factor for Ethereum is perfectly aligned with the timing of the interest rate cycle, and it's perfectly aligned with the timing of the US dollar turning down after this massive parabolic move that is now at this point almost turned into a straight freaking line up, right? What usually happens when these things turn into straight lines up? Well, they start turning down. And you can really see that when you can see those supply wicks up here above that 786. You cannot close a weekly candle above the 786. I'm looking for more closings below the 786 next week and the following week. If we see the monthly candle of September close below that 786, that is a massively bullish signal. And it might be really scary until that point, but I would just remind you that the Ethereum innovation that occurred, I don't want to call it a merge because it's very misleading. It's the innovation. It's the supply dynamic innovation that now exponentially decreases the supply of Ethereum by a factor of 3 when the demand for Ethereum is not going down, it's just going up. Yeah, that's what you call the perfect storm, kid, right? And you can't really see it on the chart right now. You can't really see that this thing is about to go like psycho, like Bitcoin did after its halving. You can't really see that yet. It happened many months later. This still might happen many months later. Who knows? I don't really need to know the timing at this point, but I know that I'm trying to accumulate altcoins at the lowest possible price I possibly can. And now I have the opportunity to do that in some coins, like Filecoin. Not every coin, but definitely Filecoin, definitely NuCypher, definitely XLM. I mean, these are likely at the bottom of their range. Like in something like XLM, you're seeing like, where is it kind of stopping? It's finding support on these levels where there was once resistance, right? So that makes sense for a bottoming structure on just this one altcoin, right? What about Bond? You know, Bond is interesting, right? Is Bond finding support back here? I don't know. You know, I don't feel as comfortable buying Bond because, you know, I bought a lot of Bond down here, right? So that's just maybe my personal bias, but it's kind of like that TRB situation, you know, is this just a wave 1 and then a wave 2 before you have a wave 3? I mean, potentially very likely if you consider this whole Ethereum fundamental bullish catalyst and then how that informs this double bottom thesis that, you know, I think is likely developing. So, you know, I see a lot of bullish things personally. And the fear, the widespread panic is also bullish. To me, that's bullish. Like, I know that I want to be going against the herd. I know that. That's crucial for my thesis. And so, good. That's what's happening right now. So, you know, for all those reasons, all I can really say is good. Good. Prophecy foretold.